What's one of the biggest threats to family farms? It might not be what's happening in the barn, but what's missing on paper. In this episode recorded live at Wisconsin Farm Technology Days, Will-McKinley of Menn Law Firm breaks down the legal side of the family dairy. From partnership structure to succession planning, Will shares what every dairy should have in place for success. That and more right here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast.
We have promised for you a conversation on not only farming with family, but the comedic relief that always comes along with Mr. Will-McKinley. So welcome to the stage, Will.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm happy to be out of the office. Any reason, any excuse.
All right, we got you out on a farm today, but we got you on a farm with a crowd.
That's right, on a farm with a crowd. Usually it's just cows, so this is good. Humans actually understand what I'm saying. That's good stuff.
So if you look over my shoulder, you'll see this QR code that's up on the screen. This is for an app called Slido. This allows any of you that are sitting in the audience today to participate in our conversation by submitting a question. I'll be able to see those questions on my phone up here, and we can address your concerns, the topics that are burning in your mind, in the time that we have in this session here this afternoon, right here at Farm Technology Days with Will. So, hey, let's just take a moment, Will, because not only are we covering a topic that's near and dear to our folks here at Farm Technology Days, but it's one that you spend a lot of time on as well. And let's just take a quick trip back to the beginning, because you grew up in corn country, correct?
That's right. I'm not from Wisconsin originally. I'm from Illinois, but I'm not a fib. I grew up in a small farm town of 900 people called Avon. It's in west central Illinois, about 5.5 hours south and west of here. No dairies, but lots of hogs, lots of corn. So grew up in, like you said, corn country.
And I believe you were also a member of the 4-H.
I was a 4-H'er, but I was a town kid. So I did the gardening and photography part. So don't throw things at me. But nevertheless, I still was a 4-H'er.
All right, so before we get into the real conversation here, I got to ask you, Will. So when you were taking your gardening projects to the county fair, what was the best entry that you were most proud of? Did you get grand champion zucchini?
I did not. I did submit zucchinis and tomatoes as well. My photo, I did win second place. It was of a seagull, of all places, up in Door County when we were there for vacation. They got second place.
Oh, second place. All right. Well, I think that qualifies you to be an attorney of that and a couple.
That's why I show up wearing a collared shirt to things like this. So.
But you put in your time at Marquette School of Law as well.
That's right. Yep. So I went to Marquette undergrad, Marquette Law School. My wife, a good German Catholic, is from Appleton. So we met in undergrad, got married. I got 5 kids. We all live in Appleton. Yep.
All right. And the person we should really be interviewing is your wife, the mother of 5 children.
Yes. 4 boys and a girl. She's nuts.
She is my hero already. Yeah. And so just talk a little bit for a moment, if you would, about Menn Law and your involvement in ag law here in Northeast Wisconsin and beyond.
Sure. So Menn Law Firm, we're based out of Appleton. We've got offices in Appleton, Chilton, Seymour, Hortonville, Green Bay. We serve farms all over the state of Wisconsin and outside of the state of Wisconsin as well. We have 5 attorneys. Our firm got married essentially to another firm, Attorney George Tuig, Rieprock, Schneider, and Halbach. They're pretty well known to be a big ag firm. So we joined together last year. We have 30 attorneys, so we're a pretty big firm, all things considered. And there's 5 of us who do almost exclusively ag work. So we handle everything from estate planning to probate to real estate to farm succession planning, which is kind of what we'll be talking about today, dealing with zoning issues, all sorts of fun things. There's a few of you in this room I know that I've done some work for, so it's good to see you as well.
And okay, so let's talk just for a moment about family farms. I heard a statistic the other day, Will, that has just really sunk in for me. And it was this. It said that only 12% of family farms pass on to a 3rd generation, and yet only 3% make it to a 4th. And when we talk about transitioning the family farm, succession plans for the family farm, we know that there are some challenges that come up. So what are some of the biggest challenges that you see when you are sitting down at the kitchen table and in the offices of these farms in the area?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is a lack of successor, a lack of a child or children or grandchild that's actually interested in farming. It's not coincidental that family farms have slowly died off. It's because, you get kids who go off to college, they become accountants, they become lawyers, they become insurance people. Farming is a tough way to make a living. There's a lot easier ways to make a living, and you really have to have a passion for it. And so one of the biggest challenges that I face is I have folks who will come in and say, we have this farm, we have no kids who are interested in it. What do we do with it? And so what we're starting to see more and more is the family farm turning into kind of this amalgamation of maybe some family, but also key employees. You've got a dairy bird manager, or you have a crop guy, younger gal, more frequently women now, which is great, that are coming in, and we're trying to figure out how can we keep the farm going, but maybe not within the family anymore. And that creates, again, a whole host of dynamics. But the single biggest problem is a lack of successor. The second biggest problem is finance, money. It's just economically, how can the farm afford to exit one owner while bringing in a new owner as well?
Here's a question that came in from our audience. What is the biggest red flag for succession planning?
As a lawyer, I can never give a straight answer. So that's a good question. It depends on the circumstance. I would say the biggest red flag in succession planning, when people come in and they're not ready legitimately to have the conversation about succession planning. Usually it's either a shotgun conversation. You have a child that's really forcing mom and dad into the conversation, and they just simply not ready to embrace it, or the flip-flop. You have mom and dad or one of the two of them who is forcing child into committing to kind of take over this behemoth, and either child or maybe child's spouse isn't ready. So I will frequently, get involved in conversations, and within 5 minutes I can tell this is probably not going to end well. And usually in those situations, what I try to do is I try to defer it. I try to kind of give them some homework, some discussion things, and kind of send them back home. And usually what that does is it kind of slows things down a little bit, because the worst thing we do is we get into this. Like I said, it's a shotgun transaction. Someone feels forced into it. And not only does that usually transaction not end well, but it ends up causing family discord, fights in the family. And we definitely don't want that.
So what I'm hearing there, Will, is the root underneath that is not all family members are on the same page with their readiness for the conversation.
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge in farm transition planning. Is you're not just dealing. This isn't like buying and selling a car wash, right? Where you just have a buyer and a seller, and it's just a money-making machine, and you haggle. This is, in many respects, it's a legacy. It's a family legacy. It's in some respects, it's a religion. It's that important. And so you've got one group of people who are maybe antsy, the other group of people who are not resistant, but they're just kind of cautious, and finding the right time to do that. And the problem is with transition planning, it takes time, and it's not something you can just snap your fingers and do it, because there's so many variables that if you wait too long, you have kind of cooked your goose a little bit in terms of what you can do. But if you do it too early, on the flip side, you're limited in what you can do. So it's kind of like the weather. It's got to be just right, before you can do it. But the first ingredient is both sides have to be committed and ready.
So being on the same page, that timing piece. And then also, once you're ready, it's memento, would you say? Being able to have that motivation to keep things moving along and to hit up those hard conversations when they come up?
Yeah, so the planning process, when we're talking about, again, it's not a transaction, it's a transition. And what I mean by that is, if you're buying and selling a car wash, you draft an agreement, You're done, and 6 months later, you exchange the keys, and that's that. With a farm, it's usually something the planning takes usually 18 months. From when people come to see me until when we're ready to pull the trigger, it's 18 months. And part of that is a product of timing in terms of finance, when it makes sense in terms of the farm's financial cycle to pull the trigger. A lot of it is farmers are busy, and it's, well, we're planting. Oh, now we're spraying. Oh, now we're chopping. Oh, now it's winter. We're going to Florida. And again, multiple parties. So it's my schedule, it's their schedule. It's also usually the CPA's schedule. It's the banker's schedule. So there's a lot of cat herding that goes into it. And so I will get people who will come to me like this time of year, and they'll say, oh, we'd like to get it done by the end of the year. And I say, okay, wave a wand. That's not going to happen if we're doing it right. So when people are, if we hit the magic point of both sides are ready to have the conversation, then you got to kind of, again, plan, assuming it's going to take 18 months from that initial meeting until we're ready to sign the documents and how to make it official. So there's a lot of time that goes into it as well, just in terms of the mechanics of the process.
But there's more to passing on a family farm than the conversations. This is where your skill set is so valuable, and it's the how.
Right.
The how do we do it? What are the vehicles that we can use to pass on property, real estate, capital assets to that next generation? But typically what we're doing here is we're trying to oftentimes retire one, if not two generations, while providing an opportunity for entry for a third. So can you speak to that? And Will, I'm guessing in your time doing this, you've got a few stories that come to mind. And what can you share about situations you've been in where there's maybe some strategies and vehicles for doing that you've been able to do with these multi-generational farms?
Sure. So farming is an interesting business to do this type of legal work in, because most businesses, you buy it, you own it, and you sell it, and you retire. Farming is different because you never sell it. All you're simply trying to do is you're trying to transition it from one ownership group to another ownership group, while the expectation is the farm continues to support the first ownership group while also then supporting the next ownership group. So just like we design our farms to be self-sustaining, everything, we try to make use of everything. The farm itself is also, and when we're doing transition planning, it's also how can the plan make sure that it's sustaining all of the owners that need to be sustained. So that can be challenging. Where it gets legally challenging is because we're dealing with a business or an entity that's been owned and operated for decades. What made sense 30 years ago in terms of maybe when the farm was incorporated or when the farm it chose to set things up in a certain way, that made sense then, but tax laws change, laws change. And then all of a sudden, the lawyers, inheriting kind of a problem that was not foreseen when things were set up. So a big part of what I have to do as a lawyer in conjunction with a CPA, tax person, is we have to sometimes untangle the mess and say, okay, we've got this C corporation, this farm that's been operating as a C corp for 35 years. It's not as simple as just saying, okay, let's just give away the stock, or let's give away the cattle, or let's give away the equipment, because that's going to trigger all sorts of really ugly tax things. So a big part of what I do and what lawyers like I do is we are really unraveling things, and we're coming to you and saying, it's kind of like going to the doctor. Here's the diagnosis. You got 3 treatment options. Choose your pain, because in many respects, there's not a perfect solution. It's kind of what is the best solution that's going to cause the least amount of tax impact and is going to be able to cash flow. You're going to be able to afford it and make it work. So in that respect, it's complicated. I hadn't done ag work my entire legal career. I've done it for a fair amount of my legal career. In my prior legal career, I represented a lot of dental practices. Well, that's easy. Dentist comes in, you buy it, you sell it. There's no thinking involved. Dairy, especially dairy, is super complicated, legally, tax, finance, everything. And so it really does require a lawyer who understands it to be able to work with it. Just like not all doctors are equal, not all lawyers are equal. And even though you may have had a lawyer that was your family lawyer for 20 years and got you out of that DUI once, not the guy you necessarily want to be trying to help you navigate a $15 million transaction. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of problem solving, a lot of digging through historical stuff to figure out, okay, what can we get away with?
Yeah, and when you look at those strategies, you mentioned taxes or something that you consider heavily, the implications on especially that retiring generation. One of the things that I know people have asked me about to cover in the work that I do through the podcast is talking about just even at a basic level, options for trust. What is a trust? And we hear about revocable trusts, irrevocable trusts, Medicaid trusts. So can you just break that down for a moment, these different types of trusts and when they make sense and when they don't make sense?
Sure. So trusts, generally speaking, are tools that we use for transitioning the farm or any asset. It doesn't have to be a farm. It could be a lake house or something. But it's to transition that asset from a living person when they croak, getting it to the next person, whoever is supposed to get it, without having to go through the probate process. And for those of you who may have heard the term, you don't know what probate is. It's kind of a naughty word in my universe. Probate is a judicial process. So it's a court process where essentially you got to get a judge or the register in probate in the county to sign off on transitioning assets from one person to another. Because a dead person can't sign a deed, the court's got to sign it for them. We don't want to go through that. It's time consuming, it's expensive, it's public, it's just annoying. So we can use trust to put assets into trusts so that when a person dies, their trust owns the asset and it just continues on after their death. And that trust just dictates how that asset's supposed to go or who it's supposed to go to. So there are lots of different kinds of trusts. The most common trust, and when you open the plat book and you're looking at the plat map and you see Smith Rev Trust or Smith Trust, that is usually what's known as a revocable trust. And a revocable trust is just an estate planning. It's like a will on steroids. It's something that we use to avoid probate, but that trust has no tax purpose. It has no Medicaid, government benefits purpose. It's just there as an estate planning tool, and a really good one and a really easy one. If you own a lot of real estate, if you own a business, if you are partners in owning real estate with someone, if you have small children, you should have a revocable trust. It's the best money you'll ever spend. You set it up when you set it up, and it's yours for the rest of your life. You can change it, you can amend it. It's easy. Then we get into more complicated trusts, which are known as irrevocable trusts. Irrevocable trusts are trusts that we use to set things up for either tax planning purposes, especially if you have a high net worth, to avoid estate tax and some other types of taxes, or we use it for government benefits planning, for Medicaid planning, where we want to make sure that grandma or grandpa aren't going to have to sell the farm or their house to pay for the nursing home. Irrevocable trusts are, as the name implies, you put the asset in, once you set it up, there's no takebacks. It's there, it's stuffed, you've given it up, but in exchange for giving it up, what you've done is you've created a situation where you can take advantage of tax things and, again, Medicaid planning things. I could spend an entire 3 hours talking about Medicaid trusts, but the takeaway here, because I get a lot of phone calls from people saying, well, I think I need a Medicaid trust. A Medicaid trust is great, but they were really good like 15 years ago because you could essentially put the asset in the trust and it basically was automatically exempt from being utilized for purposes of paying for long-term care, nursing home care. The government got smart and they said, well, wait a minute, why are taxpayers paying for someone to be in a nursing home when that person had $500,000 in the bank account or $500,000 of property? So now there's what's called a 5-year look back. So if you were to set up a Medicaid trust today and we were to put the farm or an asset into it, that transfer really does not become effective, it has no bearing until 5 years from now. And so the problem is a lot of times people come to me too late. It's too late. Either grandma's got dementia and she's already going into the nursing home. There's nothing we can do about it. On the flip side, people come to me and they're concerned about it, but it's too early. You don't want to be locking up assets that you may want to sell one day and use the money to go buy a condo in Florida or something like that. So it becomes a little bit of an exercise of gambling. You're kind of saying, okay, do I think I'm going to have to be institutionalized long-term, or my wife? It's a lot more complicated. But there are certainly times when it makes sense. It's not as easy as it used to be. Same with, again, estate planning when we're talking about irrevocable trusts, but the tax side of it. Estate planning and estate tax planning is very specific to your needs, so it requires an in-depth conversation.
So Will, thank you for expanding on those scenarios with trusts. And now I have a question in our queue, and the question asks, what is the proper percentage for a successor to buy in each year? Is it 20% until fully owned or something else?
Oh, that's a good question. And again, as a good lawyer, I'll never give you a straight answer. It depends. And it depends on a number of things. One, it depends on the timing. How quickly are you wanting to enter someone or exit someone? It depends on the cash flow and what's the deal. Is there going to be payment? So it really can't answer it. What I can say is, though, when we work on these transition plans, more and more, because of the value of the farm and the amount of on paper, you look on paper and your balance sheet says, oh, I'm like a millionaire. I sure as hell don't feel like one, but I'm a millionaire on paper, right? And so it's difficult because transitioning that much wealth on paper usually triggers really bad tax consequences. And so more and more what we're doing is we are designing transitions so that ownership actually doesn't pass until death. We are basically surrendering control of the operation, and we're shifting the growth, the increase in value, the sweat equity to the next generation. But the actual changing of ownership on paper is not happening until someone dies. And the reason for that is because we can almost wipe out all of the tax consequences that if we did that transfer while alive, we would realize. If we wait until there's a death, then we don't have to deal with any of them. So sometimes it's good things come to those who wait. And that's both from the person coming in and the person exiting. So we have to get creative. So it really does depend. Usually, though, if you're asking, what do you typically see? What we typically see is anywhere in the range of 5 to 10% per year transitioning. And that's simply because of the tax reasons and the cash flow considerations.
And when we look at that passing on of the assets upon, as you said, in many cases upon death, really what I'm getting at here, Will, is something that I know is on top of mind for a lot of our family farms. And that's when we have multiple siblings and situations where perhaps there's one sibling that is an active member of the farm. Yep. And has committed their life to that being their career and being part of that business. But perhaps there's a sibling that is not part of the family business.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's frequently the most complicated psychological thing we have to get past. Again, there's the tax stuff and the finance stuff, but then there's just the psychology of transitioning this. And usually, in my experience, there's no mom or dad or whoever, they come in and there's maybe a child that's on farm and they're the ones that are doing it. They're the clear successor. They maybe have a couple of other kids who went off to college. They live in town. They've got their lives. They do their own thing. Maybe they come back and help out at harvest or, whatever. But for them, that's just more of a novelty. It's a hobby. And there's no doubt that the kid that's on the farm should get the farm. The mom and dad are not, they don't question that. But it's the guilt of, but look how much that's worth on paper. And we're just giving it to our son or to our daughter. And our other kids aren't getting nearly that much because all they're getting is the grandfather clock and the money in the bank account and whatever else. And as a general rule in farm transition planning, I mean, this is something that it's just a principle. And if it's one that you come into my office and you don't agree with, then you're not ready to do farm transition planning. If you farm, you get the farm. If you don't farm, forget about it. But if you farm, you get the farm, and you get grandma and grandpa and the one-eyed cat, right? So the point is, if you're the farmer, you should get the farm because you're the only one, frankly, qualified to be able to keep it going for the next generation. But with that comes the responsibility of maintaining and supporting the people who came before you. And that can be a burden. And what I frequently tell my clients who are kind of struggling with this guilt of, well, we're giving them so much and we're giving our other kids so little is, what are you really giving them? Because you're giving them the farm with the expectation that they're not going to sell it. It's not like they're going to go and cash it out and then become this multimillionaire. You're giving them essentially a lot of responsibility, a lot of grief, a lot of stress with the privilege of maybe getting a new truck every once in a while and, and in a way of life. So on the other side, you're giving your non-farm kids cash. They can do anything they want to do with cash. Someone who inherits a farm, that can be a blessing, but in many respects, it could be a curse. If you have that scenario, you just have to embrace it. Now, there are lots of tools that we can use to try to make things feel a little more fair. We can use life insurance. There's other things that make sure the non-farm kids are getting something. But what is really cool is most of my experiences in the families that I've worked with, the non-farm kids totally get it. Like, if they wanted to farm, they would have stayed on farm. They chose not to, and that's fine with them. And they recognize the importance of continuing the tradition, and they're typically fine with the siblings. Where it gets a little more complicated is, frankly, you have two children who farm, one who's really into it, the other is kind of into it, and they've really just kind of farmed by default, not really because it's their passion or their vocation. And they couldn't really hold down a job elsewhere, so they just came back to the home farm and now they're helping out. That's where it gets complicated because I had one recently where mom and dad, they wanted to basically say our second oldest gets the farm, but our oldest is also on the farm, but we really can't trust giving him ownership because we're afraid of what's going to happen. How do we navigate that? And the reality is there's no easy way to navigate that. It's just at a certain point in time, it becomes business. It's just a business decision. And the farm is its own living organism. And part of being a good steward of that farm is making decisions that's going to ensure that that farm is taken care of and that it has the best chance for surviving into the next generation. So part of what I do is also being family counselor. And we always say, if you got to deliver bad news, you blame your banker, your lawyer, or your accountant. And in that case, you can blame the lawyer and say, our lawyer's this, but I'll be the one to deliver that bad news.
Well, you've touched on that situation of where we have a farm that's being transitioned within the family. However, when we first started our conversation today, one of the things that you addressed as a concern that you see very often is when there's no successor.
Yep.
And so can you speak about some stories or experiences you've had where a farm owner has come up with a creative solution or their heirs have so that that land and that operation can perhaps still be a viable farm, but with someone else managing or owning it?
Sure. Funny story, is a really good success story, a farm about 2 miles from here where we did that exact thing. I drove past it on the way up this morning, where two brothers, two farmers, no children into farming, a young guy who was kind of the dairy herd manager, was really just kind of running the show. They have no direct family successor, so they said, we want to give the farm its best chance of success. We don't want to just sell out to a big corporate dairy. We would like to work out a deal with our manager. So I said, all right, let's do it. Let's figure it out. It's complicated again, it always is with tax stuff, because where we have employees that we're trying to then just say, we want to give you a cut, we want to give you a piece of the farm, give you some ownership. Depending on the circumstance, you can't do that without that employee having to pay income tax on the value of the ownership you give to them. So you may say, hey, I'm going to give you 5% of the farm, and that 5% is worth $250,000 or something. Well, guess what? That's like giving them a $250,000 bonus at the end of the year. They're going to pay 35% income tax on that. So what we had to do is we had to get even more creative, because you can gift to your kids. You can't necessarily gift to employees. So we set up an arrangement whereby he was able to come in on a very small basis as an owner. He's going to have to wait until one of them croaks, hopefully not by poisoning, but he's going to have to wait. But once one of them passes away, then he's going to acquire that person's ownership. But in the meantime, that one of those guys is going to retire, but he's going to draw a pension from the farm. So he's going to keep getting paid out of the farm. But every dollar that he draws out of the farm, the young guy gets a credit against the purchase price based on the money that that guy received. Plus, we've baked in some discounts to make it able to be afforded. So what we've done is we've created an off-ramp for the older guys. We've also created a mechanism by which the older guys' spouses and their children who aren't farming will at least realize some economic benefit from the ownership of the farm, while also getting the young guy into the farm early so he feels vested, but setting it up in a tax manner so that nobody's eating a huge tax bully. So that's a really good success story, and again, one just right down the road from here.
And Will, as you share that success story, there are two components that really jump out at me that exemplify what you've been talking about in our conversation today. And one of them is just the clarity that family came to you knowing what they wanted. Yep. And that made it easier for you to take those next steps. And not that it wasn't complicated to figure out the how, but they knew the what. And they also came to you with the perspective of, this is what's best for our business. And we're able to remove an emotion from that conversation.
These guys kind of had the plan figured out. They knew, again, if we can wave a wand, this is what we'd like to do. And that always helps, because if you come to me with, this is what we want to accomplish, my job is then, all right, well, how do we get there? Can we get there? And this is what it's going to cost you in terms of taxes, money, whatever. Where I have people who come to me and they say, well, we have this farm, we think maybe our son wants it, we don't know. What are our options? That's really difficult for me, because there's infinite options. I mean, we can really do anything you want to do. It's got to make sense for you. So a lot of times, again, when people come to me and I can tell like they want to start the process, usually I send them away with homework. And it's, you got to answer these 10 questions. You need to talk about it amongst yourselves. Then you can come back to me and I can do my job a lot more effectively, because there are many situations where I can tell you, here's what you should do. But that's completely different than what makes sense for the parties, for whatever reason. Successful farm transition planning is not one size fits all. It is not, you just fill out a form and sign on the dotted line. It is very much personal, and it is very much customized if it's done right.
Thank you, Will. And I have another question in the queue for you as we start to wind down our time here on the rural event stage today. What is the longest generational farm that you have done succession planning for? And what trends do you see happening with succession?
4 generations, and I'm working on it right now. And it is the 4th generation. It's a brother and sister that are coming in. And biggest trend is we are more and more having to do planning where it's triggered by death. That's a big difference than 15 years ago, where mom and dad, you do the land contract, they get their monthly payments, you own the farm, no problem. Because the balance sheets of farms, especially bigger farms, has just gotten so many more zeros. It just becomes such a tax burden that it doesn't make any sense. So getting people in the mindset that, yeah, okay, I don't own the farm completely. I'm 45. I'm still working. I'm not 100% owner. I got to wait for mom or dad to pass away. That's a tough concept for people to get. But when I try to explain, like, look, it's not like you're going to sell the farm. I mean, if you're thinking of selling the farm, then we shouldn't even be having this conversation. We should just, you guys farm, when mom and dad dies, just sell it, cash out, and be done with it. So when you put it in the context of the farm just continues on, does ownership really matter? And for me, it's more about control. It's about making management decisions, doing things the way you want it done. And if we can get in a mindset that, okay, we can wait for ownership to transition, but we can transition management control kind of whenever, that is really successful. That's how we can get the most bang for our transition planning buck.
Thank you for addressing that one. And we've got a few minutes here up on the stage today. We probably have a chance for one more question if you want to throw it up in the queue. Just scan that QR code up on the screen behind me here. But Will, one thing that I'd like you to address with our crowd today is this concept of fair versus equal. Does this ever come up?
That gets back to the conversation about, well, we're giving the farm to our son or we're giving the farm to our daughter. That's not fair. Or they're getting $5 million and our other kid is only getting $25,000. How do we equalize it? You can't look at it that way. And honestly, it doesn't work. It just simply doesn't work unless you did really good planning in your 30s where you went out, you bought a bunch of life insurance, knowing that you were going to have one child farm and the other two not farm, and so you've done it that way. Because the farm can only afford to pay what the farm can afford to pay. And so I frequently will have parents say, well, the kid that's getting the farm should have to buy out the other kids. Well, all you've done is not only have you given the farm, which is in many respects a burden, sometimes a burden of love, but still a burden, but now you've saddled them with debt. That's definitely not fair to the person who's farming. And while the other kids just get the cash, and again, they can go out and go buy a condo in Florida. So we just have to understand, and I try to get people to almost ignore the farm. Like, just pretend that it's an asset. It's not liquid. Nothing can be done with it. It's just an income stream with a lot of work associated with it. Everything else, try to divide that up equally if you feel compelled to do so. But you can't factor the farm and the assets of the farm into kind of a property division with estate planning and expect that it's going to end up with the farmer being able to continue on. It just doesn't work.
Thanks for hitting that one up, Will, the fair versus equal. And I have a comment in the queue that I got to read out here from one of our audience members today. And he's quoting the great George Tuig and saying, as far as off-farm siblings and what they have or should have received is a one-of-a-kind work ethic that is highly valuable and marketable. Thank you, Ron Brooks, for that.
Ron, yes.
And as we wrap up today, Will, what I'd like you to do is, we've got a quote from George up here that you are essentially George's successor plan in this transition planning realm here. So this is your chance to tie up this conversation with a beautiful bow and a quote from Will that will live on when it comes to this topic of farming with family. Go for it.
Well, that's a lot of pressure. I didn't come prepared, and I'm not nearly as witty as George Tuig is. I will say this. It is my distinct pleasure to be able to work with farms and with the families. It's, growing up in a small town, it's always a blast to work with all of you. And it's really a privilege because as an attorney that works with farms, I get to work with multiple generations, and they really do become part of the family. And when I said earlier that in many respects, farming is a religion, it is. It is to many of you, and it's what gets you up in the morning. It's what keeps you going. It's what keeps you long living. And it's always, it really is an honor to be part of that and to be part of that journey with you. It's fascinating, and I very much appreciate those of you who continue to try to keep small farms active and going in the state of Wisconsin. I'm always happy to be a resource. I will stick around over here for a few minutes after if any of you have any specific questions. But thanks again for letting me take some time today. And even if you're just here cooling off, hopefully it was somewhat informative. Otherwise, I think there's a band coming up next. Maybe these are the groupies for the band. I don't know. But thank you again for having me.
You just heard from William-McKinley of Menn Law Firm, live from Wisconsin Farm Technology Days. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Please don't forget to follow, rate, and share these episodes. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and as always, keep on growing, keep on learning, and up-leveling your dairy.